Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. We're going to be tackling a pretty big topic today, the nervous system.
Huge topic.
Yeah, so future nurses, faculty, everyone's going to have a good grasp on this. So
Absolutely. It's the foundation.
it is. And we're going to take some, really dense medical textbook type information and hopefully break it down into some need-to-know info and some fun facts along the way.
That's right. Make it a little bit more digestible, those key takeaways and clinical pearls that you can actually take with you and use.
Perfect. Okay, so let's get started with just the basics. Like, how can we kind of conceptualize the nervous system?
Yeah, so I think a really helpful analogy is to think of it like the electrical wiring of a house.
Okay, I like that.
So you have like the main control panel, right? And that's kind of like our central nervous system, or what we call the CNS.
Okay, the CNS.
Yeah, which is composed of the brain and the spinal cord.
Yeah.
And then just like that wiring branches out to all the different rooms and appliances in the house, our CNS has the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS, branching out to all the different parts of our body.
Okay.
So it's all about communication.
Right.
The brain sending commands and receiving feedback from every single part of us.
That makes sense. So that's kind of the big picture, but let's zoom in a little bit more on the brain.
Okay.
Because it's not just one big blob, right?
No, it's not.
Like, it's divided.
Yeah.
It has all these different parts.
Yeah, so it's divided into two halves or hemispheres.
Okay.
And then each hemisphere has four lobes.
Okay.
The frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so we got lobes and hemispheres.
Yeah, so it's organized.
Wow. This sounds complicated already.
It is, but it's so cool. And each of those lobes has its own specialties,
Okay.
like different departments in a hospital.
Oh, okay. So they're all kind of working together, but they have their own
Exactly.
specific thing that they're really good at.
Yeah, so for example, the temporal lobe, it helps us understand language,
Okay.
which is obviously like super important in a medical setting.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Imagine trying to decipher doctor's orders without it.
That would be a disaster.
Total disaster.
Okay, so we got the lobes, we got the hemispheres. What about all this gray matter, white matter stuff?
Right.
What is that all about?
Okay, so think of gray matter as like the processing centers of the brain.
Okay.
Like bustling offices where information is being analyzed, decisions are made.
Oh, okay. I like that.
And then white matter is kind of like the network of cables
Okay.
connecting everything together.
Right.
And these cables are actually super fast because they're coated with the special substance called myelin.
Myelin, I remember learning about that.
Yes.
It's kind of like the insulation around electrical wires, right?
Exactly. It helps speed up the transmission of signals.
So it makes everything run more smoothly.
Yeah, exactly. So myelin is super important for like quick reflexes and smooth movements and pretty much every thought and action that we take.
Wow. So if you don't have enough myelin, is that when you get problems?
Yeah, so without it, our brains would be like super sluggish and inefficient.
Okay, so myelin superhighway
Yes, the super higher.
for the brain.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, so we've got all this going on in this bustling brain city.
Yes.
What are some like key landmarks that we should know about within the brain?
Okay, so deep inside the brain, we have what's called the basal ganglia.
Basal ganglia.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that?
I have heard of that, but I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, it's a little bit more obscure, but they're so essential for coordinating movement.
Movement.
Yeah, so think about all the like intricate muscle actions that we do every day.
Okay, yeah.
Like walking, talking, even just holding a pen. The basal ganglia play a key role in making those movements smooth and effortless.
Oh, wow. Okay, it's kind of like the fine motor movement.
Yeah, you can think of it like that. It's all about coordination and smooth movements.
Got it. Okay, and then what about the thalamus?
The thalamus.
I feel like I've heard of that one. Yeah, the thalamus is like the grand central station of the brain.
Oh, okay.
So imagine all the sights and sounds and feelings coming in from your body as passengers.
Right.
The thalamus sorts them and sends them to the right part of the brain, just like a train station directs people to their destination.
So it's like the operator,
Yeah, exactly.
making sure everything's going to the right place.
Keeps everything running smoothly.
All right, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So we've got the basal ganglia, we got the thalamus, and then there's the hypothalamus, right?
Yes, the hypothalamus.
Isn't that the one that's like in charge of temperature regulation, hunger?
Yes, you got it. So it's all about maintaining homeostasis.
Homeostasis.
Yeah, so keeping your body in balance.
Okay.
So it's why you shiver when you're cold and you sweat when you're hot.
Right.
It's all part of keeping your body temperature just right.
So it's kind of like the thermostat of the body.
Exactly like the internal thermostat.
Got it.
And it also controls your hunger and thirst, making sure you're getting the fuel and hydration that you need.
So it's like mission control up in there.
It is. It's a busy place.
Yeah, it's busy up there in the brain.
All right.
All right, so we've got the brain, we've got the control center. What about the spinal cord? What's its role in all of this?
Right. So the spinal cord, it's like the main cable running down from that control panel we were talking about, carrying messages back and forth between the brain and the rest of the body.
Oh, okay.
And it's super protected too, inside the bony vertebral column.
Yeah.
But it can still be vulnerable to injury.
Yeah.
Which is why we have to be really careful when we're doing things like, lumbar punctures.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like I remember learning about that, like how important it is to identify the correct, vertebral interspace.
Exactly.
So you don't hit the spinal cord.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with the spinal cord.
No, definitely not. All right, so branching out from this main cable then,
Yes.
we've got...
all the peripheral nerves.
Okay.
All those wires extending to every single muscle and sensory receptor in your body.
Okay.
It's a two-way communication system, constantly relaying information about, movement sensations and even internal organ function.
So is that like when I touch something hot and I immediately pull my hand away?
Yes.
That's my peripheral nerves.
Yeah, that's a reflex,
Right.
like a rapid, involuntary response to a stimulus.
Got it.
But the peripheral nerves do so much more than just reflexes.
Oh, okay.
They allow us to experience the world around us through our senses.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So speaking of senses, let's talk about cranial nerves.
Ooh, yes.
I know these are so important for nurses to understand,
They are.
but sometimes it feels like a lot to remember.
There's 12 pairs.
12.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Each with its own unique function.
Okay.
So think of them as like specialized teams of messengers directly connected to the brain,
Okay.
controlling everything from smell and vision to facial expressions and swallowing.
Wow, okay, so break it down for me.
Okay.
What are like some cranial nerves we absolutely need to know?
All right, so let's start with the olfactory nerve. Yeah. That's responsible for our sense of smell.
Okay.
It's often affected by things like sinus conditions, head trauma, even some medications.
Oh, wow.
So if a patient reports a change in their sense of smell,
Right.
that's definitely something to take note of.
Okay, that makes sense. And then what about vision?
Vision, that's handled by the optic nerve.
Okay.
So assessing vision and examining the eye for any signs of, swelling, optic atrophy, glaucoma, those are all crucial parts of a neurological assessment.
Okay. And are there any other cranial nerves that really kind of stand out in terms of their clinical significance?
Absolutely. So the facial nerve, it controls our facial expressions.
Okay.
And damage to this nerve, like in Bell's palsy,
Right.
can cause weakness or paralysis on one side of the face.
I remember learning about Bell's palsy.
Yeah.
That can be really distressing for patients,
It can.
especially because it, affects their ability to smile and just their nonverbal communication.
Exactly. So, it can really impact their quality of life.
Yeah, for sure. And it's important to be able to tell the difference, right, between like a peripheral lesion like Bell's palsy
Right.
and then a central lesion like from a stroke.
Exactly.
Because I remember one affects like the whole half of the face.
Yeah, so a peripheral lesion like Bell's palsy will affect the entire half of the face.
Okay.
Whereas a central lesion like from a stroke typically spares the forehead muscles.
So paying attention to those subtle differences can really help us
It can
figure out where the problem is.
pinpoint the location.
Okay. That's a great clinical pearl.
Right.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit
Right.
and talk about motor pathways.
Okay.
How does the brain tell our muscles what to do?
Right, because it seems so effortless when we move,
Right.
but there's so much going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I bet. Okay.
So the main pathway for voluntary movements is called the corticospinal tract.
Corticospinal.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a superhighway of nerve fibers.
Oh, wow.
Originating in the brain's motor cortex and traveling all the way down to the spinal cord. Okay.
Where they connect with lower motor neurons that directly control our muscles.
So it's like a relay race.
Exactly.
The signal starts in the brain,
Yeah.
goes down the spinal cord,
Uh-huh.
and then gets passed off to the muscles.
You got it.
Okay, and just like in a relay race, I'm assuming things can go wrong at different points.
Of course they can.
Okay.
So damage to the upper motor neurons, like in a stroke,
Okay.
can lead to increased muscle tone and hyperreflexia,
Okay.
making the muscles feel really tight and resistant to movement.
So they're kind of like
Yeah, they're stiff.
stiff.
Spastic.
Okay. Whereas damage to the lower motor neurons,
Right.
like from a peripheral nerve injury or something,
Yeah.
that causes weakness,
Weakness.
decreased muscle tone.
Yep. And even muscle wasting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it can be really debilitating.
So understanding those differences is super important as a nurse
They do.
because it helps us, really interpret what our patients are experiencing
Exactly.
and tailor our care to that. Right, because the treatment's going to be different depending on where the problem is.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, what about sensory pathways?
Sensory pathways.
How do we experience the world around us?
Right, so sensory pathways are like the information highways carrying messages from our body back to the brain,
Okay.
allowing us to feel, touch, pain, temperature, even our position in space,
Okay.
where our limbs are.
So like when I stub my toe,
Yes.
that pain signal goes from my toe all the way up to my brain.
It travels all the way up your leg, through your spinal cord, and then to your brain where it's interpreted as pain.
Wow. And there are different pathways for different types of sensations.
There are.
Okay.
So for instance, the spinothalamic tract, it carries pain and temperature information.
That's spinothalamic.
Yeah.
Okay.
While the posterior columns, they transmit sensations of touch, vibration, and proprioception.
Proprioception.
Yeah, that's our body's awareness of its own position.
Like if I close my eyes, I know where my hand is.
Exactly.
Even though I can't see it.
You go,
Oh, that's fascinating. I never realized there were so many different pathways
It's amazing.
carrying all this information.
It really is a complex system.
wow. Okay, so understanding these pathways helps us make sense of conditions like diabetic neuropathy,
Yes.
where there's damage to the peripheral nerves,
All right.
and it causes all kinds of sensory problems.
Well, wide range of symptoms.
Yeah, and that's something we see pretty often in nursing.
We do.
So we really got to be aware of the different ways it can manifest.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now let's talk about reflexes.
Reflexes.
I remember those reflex hammers
Oh, yeah.
from clinical rotations,
Tap, tap, tap.
but what exactly are reflexes?
Okay, so reflexes are those like lightning fast involuntary responses to stimuli.
Okay.
We talked about them a little bit earlier.
All right.
Like they're built-in safety mechanisms protecting us from harm.
Got it.
And testing reflexes gives us really valuable information about the integrity of the nervous system.
Okay, so when the doctor taps on my knee and my leg kicks out,
That's not just a random twitch.
no, it's a reflex.
It's telling us something.
Yeah, it's telling us about the health of your spinal cord.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
Okay.
each reflex is associated with specific spinal segments.
Okay.
So if a reflex is absent or diminished,
Right.
that can actually help us pinpoint the level of the spinal cord where there might be a problem.
So it's like little clues
They are.
to help us solve the mystery
Exactly.
of what's going on.
We're like detectives.
I love that.
Yeah, so reflexes are an essential part of any neurological exam.
Okay, so speaking of which, let's talk about the neuro exam.
Okay.
Like, what are the essential elements that every nurse needs to know?
The fundamentals.
Okay.
All right, so let's break down this neuro exam.
Okay, where we even begin?
Well, the first step is always to observe the patient. We're looking at their mental status.
Okay.
Are they alert and oriented?
Right.
Can they follow commands? How's their speech?
Okay.
This gives us a general sense of how well their brain is functioning.
So it's kind of like taking a mental snapshot before we
Exactly.
dive into the physical.
Go hands-on.
Okay, got it. So then we move on to cranial nerve testing.
Right, so systematically checking each of those 12 cranial nerves.
All 12 of them.
All 12.
Okay.
We're looking for any signs of weakness, sensory loss, or abnormal reflexes.
I remember practicing cranial nerve assessments in lab.
Yeah,
It takes practice
it does.
to get comfortable with all the different tests.
It definitely does, but with repetition, it becomes second nature.
Okay.
So next, we assess the motor system,
Okay.
checking muscle bulk, tone strength, and coordination.
Got it.
We're looking for any signs of weakness, tremors, or involuntary movements.
And we also assess their gait, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like how they walk.
Yeah, observing their gait can reveal a lot about their balance, their coordination,
Yeah.
any underlying issues.
Right, because sometimes there are subtle things you might not pick up unless they're actually moving around.
Exactly.
Okay, so then after gait, we move on to sensory testing.
Right, so we're checking their perception of touch pain, temperature, vibration, and proprioception.
So basically, we're mapping out their sensory landscape,
Exactly.
looking for any areas of numbness or...
Altered sensation.
Okay.
And then finally, we test those reflexes.
Oh, yeah.
Biceps, triceps, patellar, Achilles.
Tap, tap, tap.
Looking for symmetry and any abnormalities that might point to problems.
So the neuro exam really involves a lot of looking, listening, and feeling.
It does.
It's about putting all those pieces together
like a puzzle.
to get that whole picture of the patient.
Exactly.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the basic anatomy of the nervous system
Right.
all the way to, how to actually assess for neurological conditions.
And all the complexities.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. The nervous system is so complex, but it's also so fascinating.
It is.
And understanding it is absolutely crucial for, providing competent and compassionate care.
Couldn't agree more so. To all of our listeners out there, whether you're a student nurse just starting out or a seasoned faculty member, keep learning, stay curious, and never stop exploring this amazing world of neuroscience.
And remember, the nervous system is more than just textbooks and diagrams.
Right.
It's the very essence of who we are.
Yeah.
Our thoughts, our feelings, our movements, our experiences.
It's everything.
Embrace that complexity and you'll be amazed by what you discover.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the nervous system.
Yes, thank you.
Till next time, keep those brains buzzing.